My name's Adrian, and the project really is, it struck me a long time ago that people who've been around the world for a long time probably have very interesting stories. Oftentimes what we do is we hear stories of famous people and the politicians and people who win wars and so on. But ordinary people also have very interesting stories, and I thought I'd like to listen to them, and I think other people would too. So I think we ought to be looking to hear lots of those stories, save them for posterity. My mother was getting on, so about a year ago I decided we need to get some of these stories. So I took my grandson Owen and my son, and we drove to Birmingham taking a camera, and we managed to capture some of her stories, and I think they're interesting. I hope you'll enjoy them. My mother was born in a place called Ashby-de-la-Zouch, which apparently dates back to 1066 and the Norman conquest, hence the French sounding name, but it's actually in Leicestershire. She then, at a very young age I think, they moved to Birmingham because my grandfather, her father, needed work, and Birmingham was, in those days, was the city of 1,000 trades, so if you wanted work you went to Birmingham.
We had a yard, not a garden, it was a yard, and a great big gate that Dad built. Ever such a nice gate it was. Painted it red, it was lovely. Well, from the outside I could climb up. It had a lock on. I couldn't unlock it. And we weren't allowed to play in the street. I always wanted to play. So I climb up outside and drop down the other side of snow. So of course I couldn't climb back in, couldn't get in. Unless somebody opened it for me, I couldn't. So of course what was ready for me was the stick. I was always having good hidings, I was.
Well, my grandfather, he was an interesting character. I think that he was what's called a wheelwright, which was a person who made wheels from wood. If you think about the old-fashioned horse and cart, it was a wooden wheel with a metal band around the outside. It was quite a skilled trade, but he eventually ended up as being the inspector of Rolls-Royce cars. So when a car came off the production line, it had to pass him before it was passed as this car is finished and it's perfect and so on. So he worked for Rolls-Royce as one of their top inspectors. My grandfather actually, I remember him well, we were good friends. He was still working till about 80 plus.
He used to work with, what's his name, Lord Austin. He wasn't the owner of the company then. He was building special cars with Dad. But Lord Austin begged about Dad to go in with him. See, he was stupid, how Dad was.
He was stupid.
Well, I mean, and they said, look how well off we'd have been now, Mum. Well, all I remember of him is working. He'd got a motorboat and a sidecar and a car. Didn't like the car really, but he did rather love it. But in the end he sold the car to Dad.
I didn't know anybody else in the area who owned a car apart from my grandfather. It was a very unusual thing in those days. Nowadays you can't park anywhere. In those days I never saw another car apart from my grandfather's.
But Dad would take you anywhere, anywhere. He didn't care where he took you. He always wanted you. He thought the world of you.
My grandfather was a very, very proud kind of guy. Lots of people didn't get on with my grandfather. I did, but lots of people didn't. He was a bit cussed. He was bald, and if anybody knocked the door, he would always put his hat on and go to his garage, and he'd come back into the house when whoever had knocked the door had gone. He was that kind of person. Talking to my mother, I used to say that she needed counselling, but my mother always said that she didn't. But some of the things that happened, I think it was that day and age in my opinion, were pretty awful. My mother, I don't know, I reckon it was stress, but as a youngster lost her hair, so that got her into trouble at school and she got called named and bullied. The youngest one, Nance, needed glasses, so I remember her telling me one day that my grandfather wouldn't take her shopping unless she took her glasses off, and she said she wouldn't go because she couldn't see anything without them. So he was, and then my aunt Gwen was only 3 foot tall when I knew her, and I think that embarrassed my grandfather. So when visitors came, he would hide those 3 children away, which was, a really terrible thing. When I used to listen to my mother's stories, I used to think, you do need counselling, it's like some awful stuff, really. But I think in those days they just took it as normal.
I wouldn't go home, you see. I'd stay with my friend, the park and play till as late as 12 o'clock. Nadine and Elsie Bowen was her name, the friend. They came to fetch me, and I wouldn't walk. They had to drag me. They had to drag me with my feet on the floor. I wouldn't walk. Because our Aunt Claire was at our house then. And our mum got the stick out, and she gave me the biggest thrashing of my life. And I was upset, I cried, because our Auntie Claire said, Addie, you'll kill her. So she said, I will kill her. And Mum said, because I wouldn't stop out, she said.
I remember my mother telling me one story about fighting for my aunt because somebody had picked up my aunt and she'd got hold of some girl who was calling her names and was swinging this poor girl around by her hair, and the other people were shouting, you're going to kill her, to which she responded, I will kill her. I think my mother got into fights at school, partly because she'd lost her hair, but also because people used to bully my little aunt and she would end up defending them. Funnily enough, she told me that at one stage they had a voted head person in the school and she got voted in as head girl, but she was also in trouble because apparently one of the teachers reprimanded some child and she stood up and attacked the teacher because she said that you are only picking on that particular child because she's poor, you don't pick on the rich kids in the class and so on. So she got sort of justice heart and tried to sort of fight those particular issues. I mean, I saw my mother do things like that even as a young teenager. I remember a guy beating a horse that had fallen on the floor because in my day everything was delivered by horse and cart, and she rushed over to the man, took the whip off him and threatened to beat him if he didn't stop beating the horse, and it was like, get me out of here quick.
I know one man, he went to hit me with his whip because it was a frosty morning, Allen Street, do you remember Allen Street? And it was steep, and the poor horse, he couldn't grip, he's trying his hardest to grip, and he was thrashing him with a whip as hard as I went for him, hook, line and sinker. Your dad, he went away, he wasn't going to get involved. And I shouted at the man, I'll report you to the co-op. I said, you're beating that horse like that. And he's doing his best to get up. I said, you wouldn't ought to be trying to stride up there like that horse. But he lifted his whip like that and was going to hit me. I said, that'll be the last thing you'll ever do on this job. You hit me.
After leaving school, so I asked my mother what happened then. I know that she worked at Cadbury's, the chocolate people.
There was something happened and I went before Dorothy Cadbury and she said, let me feel your hands. Oh, she said, you've got very cold hands. Would you like to be a chocolate maker? I said, oh, I've always wanted to be a chocolate maker. She said, right, you shall have. They put me, so I was given the job as a chocolate cover. You've got little squares and things. You threw them in the chocolate, picked them out, and put them on made a mark on the belt.
Nowadays it's all by machine, but in those days, you know those little things you have in your chocolate box that tells you this is a coffee cream, this is a strawberry and so on. Nowadays there's always a mark on the top so you can tell which chocolate is which. In the day that my mother worked at Cadbury's, that would have all been done by hand, so you'd have a belt of chocolates coming. Each girl would have a tool and they would make the mark on the thing, and they got paid according to how many chocolates they made the mark on. So 3 marks for caramel, and 1 mark for a coffee cream and so on. It was quite a skilled job in a funny sort of way.
Because I was so quick on it. The girls used to swap with me. I had a rock line that I couldn't earn my money on. I'd do theirs and they'd do mine. Because I couldn't earn my money on certain lines. If you had a good line, you were all right, but if you had a bad one, you couldn't earn the money on it. They were day workers, you see, and they did rotten things to it. And I know one day, because we're all opposite one another, on a different line, you see. And they come up and they said to me, all your work's been taken off. You've got to mess with it. I said I haven't. And the girl next to me went down the bottom of the belt to have a look what was happening, and it was her work they were taking off. And she wouldn't own up, that poor. So I was losing all that money. I wasn't getting a penny for what I did. And she wouldn't own up to it. I told this day worker I was a Christian, and she gave me work I could not earn my money in. Bad line. I said it couldn't. So she held me and said, oh, you've got caught. Would you like to be a chocolate coverer? I said, oh yes, I've always wanted to do that. So she put me on a line I could earn me money on. In the Crushaw, when I used to come down the Crushaw, they called it the Crushaw because there's 1,000 girls going down to lunch, you see. And I used to go. There'd be a great big gap round me. Nobody would walk by me because they didn't want me to preach to them.
When I was younger, I lived with my parents lived with my grandparents, so I lived in the same house. So even after they moved home in Birmingham, I must have spent every single day at my grandparents' house. So I knew my grandmother very, very well. In the house was my grandparents, my parents, me, 2 aunts, and eventually a cousin who ran away from home lived there, and then his sister also ran away from home and she lived there. So it was a very, very big, busy house. Yeah. I think my grandfather actually built those. Hello! Now you're on camera. It's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cars.
Oh wow.
We used to bring our cars in.
You want the garden used to go all the way around.
Okay.
Right, and because I used to have a paper round just around the corner. I used to, rather than go all the way round to Park Lane, I used to climb over.
That's just
They did that.
we've been here 40 years, we did the same.
Did you do it?
Yeah, until the council took that over and started
Because
building.
of the shops around over
shops,
there, aren't they?
yeah, we did
I
the
used to
same.
climb over the
Yeah, we did exactly the same. Yeah.
So-
We just knocked this down 3 years now, 2 years.
Is that all?
Yeah, because what happened was
You-
it's rotting away
Yes,
like,
they said
really,
it was
really
locked
bad.
up. Yeah.
So we thought, rather than spending all that money, we had the quote, so
Yeah,
we thought,
yeah.
let's, with the kids, open the garden up.
Well, actually, my grandfather died, and then my parts.
There was no extension then, was it, and all that?
No, it was all still
It
here.
was only up to here, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, we did an extension. We've been here about 40 years now. And we thought,
I mean,
you
as
know what?
kids, it was a fun place to play, you know.
Yeah. My God.
It's like this, though, but there used to be a little tiny kitchen.
Yeah,
In Old English, we call it a scullery.
Yeah.
And then
You know
the
what?
kitchen.
It's still next door. They still got that.
Is that right?
Yeah, this used to be the extension.
Okay.
Yeah, this is where extension used to be. But he was up to here, wasn't it?
About that, yes.
About this size,
Yeah.
Got this going
And that was the scullery, we
yeah,
called
it's
it.
the scullery, and the 2 toilets were outside there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been lovely. Is
And
the
then-
kitchen the same?
I mean, it was very old fashioned. In fact, in here, they had, you could boil the kettle and it had black ovens.
Okay.
So you could do the cooking on the fire, on the coal fire.
Yeah, now you're talking years.
Yeah, it's coal fire.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's all
I mean,
changed now.
No central heating.
Yeah, no central heating. Yeah.
In fact, I remember in the winter it was freezing.
freezing.
Everybody sat near the fire.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Yeah, my mum. Yeah, that's my grandma.
Hello there. Here
94.
was a great big black thing you could put, and
Oh,
two
wow.
ovens.
2 ovens.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, it used to be 2 ovens and everything.
Yeah, so you had a great big oven there and an oven here. It was all fire coal.
By cold up and all. Yeah. So cheap. So
It's a long time since I've lived in Birmingham, so I feel as I'm lost.
The only thing is that the road's gone really busy.
Yeah, well, my grandfather had a car.
Yeah.
He was the only person that
Wow.
I knew around here that had a car. You never saw cars.
Never saw
And I was
Wow.
telling this lot that everything came by horse and cart.
Yeah.
So milk,
Yeah.
bread.
So they used to keep the horses here, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to keep the horses
Yes.
here.
So I realised that my mother must have been around during the war, so I was interested to know certain things. What army was my grandfather in? Well, my mother said he was not in an army because he was a skilled ambulance maker.
And he was broken-hearted because they wouldn't let him go to war. So all his brothers, Uncle Liz and Uncle Bert, all of them went to war. And he wanted to go as well. But they wouldn't let him go because he was more use because he was building ambulances. And so those kind of people were prevented from joining the army because they needed those skilled people to stay and do what they did best and build lots of ambulances. She then told me that she'd ended up having to walk home during a raid with a policeman escorting her. During the war, everything was blacked out, so every house had to have very black, dark curtains. No light was allowed anywhere, the idea being that the bombers coming over from Germany couldn't see anything on the ground. So what they used to do to start the bombing raid is the planes would come in and drop what's called incendiary bombs. They were not explosive, but they would set fire to things, creating a great deal of light so that the bombers could see the targets that they were aiming to hit. And one of these bombs dropped in the next door neighbour's house, and my mother, being my mother, jumped over the fence and tried to stamp the bomb out with her feet, while my father was trying to get hold of a stirrup pumper, they were called, to put water on the fire. He climbed the fence, split his eye under rusty nail in a main artery and almost died. He ripped down his eye. We thought he'd go blind. And I was still waiting. When I had come in less, I laid the water. Anyway, me trying to protect him made it worse because they come out to me and they said, Ed, you'll have to come. The kitchen's swimming with blood. And then I'll go out, shout for the help, because there was all these men in a house, a big house it was, very well to do. They didn't come. It was the woman who owned the house come. And they had to walk him all the way to the hospital to get his eye fixed up. Because it's his job. He needed his eyes. And when we got to the hospital, the last I saw of him before I fetched him home, it was that caught the thing and that laid the tweezers across his nose and wheeled him in to have an operation on him. The policeman caught me home. Buildings were falling down everywhere. And they said, "Come on in, get down on the floor, you'll get up." I said, "I'm not getting on the floor in my best coat." I'd got a new coat on and I wasn't going to go on the floor and get it dirty. This policeman, he thought I was very, very bright. He said, "I've never met anybody like your daughter." He said, "She's wonderful." He said, "You can't push her to do anything wrong." He said, "I tried to get her to lie down when the bombs were coming down. She wasn't going to lie down. She'd got her best coat on." He was telling our dad this. He was so proud of me, the man was. But was our dad not only alive? Got told off. But being like that, but still, never mind, I'll probably do grow up the better for it.
These are new, yeah. Yeah, all the bushes are new.
So did that fence go much further back?
Yeah, a lot further back.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, a lot further back.
So,
Yeah.
because he had huge lawn.
It used to be massive, yeah. I still remember
massive,
that.
and a
When we
shed.
were kids, yeah. We used to still play on that.
Did you?
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
But you do get a central
Of course.
attachment to places.
Oh, it must have been lovely in your days.
As a kid, you don't sort of recognise it.
You don't.
So you say you used to climb the fence as well?
Yeah, that's what we used to do. Yeah, go to the shops, family. We used to do exactly the same. Climb over the fence, never go around.
My grandmother would
Yeah.
say, "Can you go to the shop?" So that you wouldn't go all the way
No,
around.
we
You go
never.
climb over the
Straight
fence,
over the fence.
and then come back over the fence.
Exactly what we do. Yeah, I'm 44 now. Back in 10, 11, 12, we used to always do that.
Yeah,
Never walked around.
I know. It's so funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
People are still.
Even after I left here to live in Eastwood Road, I must have been here every day, really. It was a great place to come and play. I guess he's the boss, is he?
Yeah, he's the boss. He's my dad. Yeah,
Me and my wife
yeah,
and my children and my grandchildren
yeah. So we live
Right.
together. As he said, it was a big room
and my
upstairs.
mom
And
Yeah.
your mum.
and my
Yeah,
mom.
How old is your mother?
92 now.
Oh, she's such a youngster then.
92 youngster, yeah. 92 dementia and that, you know.
Wow.
But this is my wife.
Nice
Yeah.
to meet you properly.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Nice to meet
And
you too.
there's my daughter in the middle in the black. That's a twin. So that's her brother. That's a twin. There's one of the
Okay.
twin with that, and these two are twins as well.
That's
Yeah.
Kitty.
So that's my,
Well,
that
son in
is,
the family.
yeah.
My mother didn't make it to 102. I wish she had have done, because then I would have taken a camera and recorded some more stories. Maybe you will get some stories from the people that you know and let me see them, because I bet they're interesting. I'm Adrian Hawkes, and this has been the stories of my mother, Edith Hawkes. I hope you've enjoyed.
Am I 102?
Well, you're 101, but you're 102 in November of this year.
Perhaps I'll be gone to heaven by then. That's just my luck. I'll be staying ages. I just...
Oh, dear me.